me start this session with some very special quote. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Precisely 151 years ago, on 19th of November, at Gettysburg, President Lincoln spoke about people and their governments. Today, the word we see after 155 years has changed. The word we see today is about cities, about its people, but more precisely, the shifting focus of the word. This is the reality of the word that we see, and the slide is slightly old. It shows the data from 2007 and 8, but cities are the focus of the earth today. And the important role the governments and the people play in the cities are becoming very interesting debate all around the world. When we look at democracy, in my view, it is probably one of the biggest gifts in human history. What it brings is equality and pride. It brings equality and pride through the cities in the world. Cities today are aspiring to make their cities throughout the world more livable, demonstrating more equity, providing more infrastructure, social and political opportunities, and creating new economic corridors. So, livable, equitable cities become one of the most pressing objectives of the smart cities around the world today. Cities are also aspiring not only in terms of the physical infrastructure, what we call the tangible infrastructure, but also making people at the forefront of their city's debate. People are becoming more and more involved in the future of their cities. So today, we look at the wide diversity between our cities, how we can make them more livable, how we can make them more equitable, and we have an opportunity to have very interesting cross-section of speakers from all around the world. This slide gives you an idea in a global perspective that our speakers are coming all the way from Indonesia, from Middle East, from Africa, Latin America, and US. My name is Sunil Dubey, and it is my honor and pleasure to be moderator of this session. My city, City of Sydney, and my organization, Metropolis Word Association, is proud to be leading and engaging in such an important dialogue on global cities. Without any further delay, I would like to look at our speaker one. Imagine a city where culture, heritage, and history is fundamental to its prosperity, planning, and sustainable future. The important relationship between past and future has to be managed with great wisdom and foresight. It is my pleasure to welcome Honorable Mayor of Beirut, Dr. Bilal Hamad, to share with us his experiences and works in city of Beirut. Apart from his political position, Dr. Hamad is civil and environmental engineer, which gives him an opportunity to connect with both tangible, like infrastructure, water supply on a day-to-day basis, and intangible, history, social good, culture, aspects of the city of Beirut. Honorable Mayor, welcome to Smart City Barcelona.
be here this afternoon. I don't know if I'm heard. Am I heard?
Yep.
You can hear me well? I'm proud to be here this afternoon. Thank you to the organizers. I hope that in the time limit that is given me, I can give you a picture of what we've been doing since I started my term back in 2010. You know, Beirut is an old heritage city. It is a city that has historical background in the region. We had so many challenges, and we had to set many priorities in our 4 years journey, which will stay for 2 more years. Let me see how I move this. You see, this is a city which had a lot of destruction back in the 70s and the 80s. As you see a picture of the same place, how it was before, during the war, and how we turned it to be a beautiful place, the downtown Beirut, after the war. This is the building of the municipality during the Civil War, and this is how it looked just after the Civil War, even nicer than how it was. This was built during the Ottoman era. A city which was reborn in the 90s. How do we make it sustainable and livable for the future? You know that we are a country of population like 4 million and a half. Almost 1/3 of the population live in Beirut. And almost, it's a city of 1 million cars. 200 to 300,000 cars move in Beirut every day, and we don't have a public transport system because the country has been working on this for a long time, and political instability has hindered the creation of public transport. Our strategy, we had to create a vision. We had to address the challenges and set priorities and define our resources and come with a roadmap and start executing this roadmap. We have a very centralized system. The government is working right with us. The governor has the executive power inside the municipality, and he's an employee who is appointed by the government. This is a very bad centralized system which we have to live with in Lebanon. We have to set a partnership with the private sector. We had to upgrade our administrative work, and we had to develop the trust of the people in their leaders. And this is very low in our part of the world. We had to address the struggle between development on one side, heritage on the other side. Look at this picture, an old heritage building and a tower. This is what we see in Beirut these days. Look at these beautiful buildings in downtown Beirut, and cranes are all around it. Priorities: urban planning, traffic, public transport, parking. Having a master plan for Beirut city resilience, build up safety against crime and terrorism. Let me start with urban planning and show you some of the pictures of the work that we've been doing. Infrastructure. Now I'm proud that we have an infrastructure which is modernized for all Beirut. And this is some pictures of what we did in the last 4 years in different streets in Beirut. Badaru. This is a rather poor area, Tariq Jdidi. Sidewalk furniture, street furniture, infrastructure for stormwater line, wastewater line. This is Marlies, one of the busiest shopping streets. Uzai Street, this is the old downtown street, from the Barbir area to the downtown area. The infrastructure went back to the Ottoman era. We had to change it, modernize it, upgrade it. This is the Musaytbi area, right in the residential area. You see, because of the war, many of our commercial sectors moved from downtown Beirut, where all the commercial business was before the war, before the Civil War, in the 70s and the 80s, and it moved into our residential areas. So now we have mixed use of residential and commercial areas. That's why we had to upgrade our infrastructure to handle all the pressure of the new towers and the commercial business and the restaurants, which moved all over the place in the residential quarters. Bridge rehabilitation. As a bridge designer myself, we assessed all the bridges in Beirut, and we went through an upgrading of all the bridges, the temporary bridges and the long-term bridges. You see, whatever was temporary before the war, it went out to be a lifetime bridge. So we had to check the structure strength and upgrade them, upgrade the joints. This shows you some jacketing to the existing bridges of one of the mostly used bridge in Beirut, and how it looks like today. Tunnel projects. This is a very busy intersection. Actually, it's the busiest intersection in Beirut, right at what used to be called the demarcation line between East Beirut and West Beirut. And now, these pictures are during the works, and now it looks like this. The works are almost done, and we have a beautiful landscape area. We will have it in a few weeks above the tunnel. Another tunnel. What we did with our stairways, these were forgotten about. Look how it was before and how it looks like today. Another bridge. Picture to the left shows you how it was, and this is how it looks today, and we will have some landscape right in between the two stairways. Another stairway, before and after. These, Beirut is a hilly city, so we have a lot of stairways connecting different streets and different neighborhoods inside the city. And these were just forgotten about for ages. For the old heritage stairways, we kept the stones. We just did some sandblasting for all this stone to keep the beautiful texture of those stairways, with some modernizing of the infrastructure, lighting, and so on. Another picture of a stairway. Another picture of how it was and how it is today. Another one. And I keep going. I don't have to show you all the stairways because this is a great job we're proud of. Another thing, the green spaces. You see, also the city of Beirut, we have shortage of green space. So we had to do a large repair project of all the green spaces, including Hirsch Beirut, which is a 300,000 square meter lung for the city of Beirut. I show you some pictures. This is Hirsch Beirut. We just approved a master plan, and we will start working on execution of this master plan in a couple of months. How it looks how it looks like now, and how it will be in the future. Picture to the left is the current position of the Hirsch and how it looks like now. This is a very nice garden. This is a 20,000 square meter garden. This is how it looked like when we started our term as city council. The same garden, this is how it looks like today. It's one of the most beautiful masterpieces in Beirut and the region, I think. And this is actually the result of partnership with the private sector. Just beautiful. Every weekend, I have 10,000 people visiting this garden on Saturdays and on Sundays, and it's open free to all people. This is another garden. This is how it looked like before we started our term, and this is how it looks like today. This is another garden. This is the current situation. And this is our image. We are finalizing the design, and we will start, beginning of 2015, we will start execution. In every garden, we are having, big garden, we have an amphitheater so that we have live shows and plays and orchestras during weekends for the people to enjoy. Another garden, current situation, actually we just started working on this garden. This is another new garden. We are expropriating pieces of land in some residential areas. We will have parking under the land, and above it we will have a garden for the neighborhood. Another garden. It's almost sand. There is no greenery in this garden. We will have parking under the garden, and we will rehabilitate all this green space. Also, museums. This is a museum, this is a building which we expropriated right at the center of Beirut, also at Sodico Square. This is how it looks like before we started rehabilitating this building, and we will make it the Museum of Memory of Beirut. This is how it looked like after the war, and this is our project. This is during the works today. This is another museum, which was open only once a year. Now we will have it a museum which will be open every day for all those people interested, students and artists and so on. This is how it looks like today. Just beautiful. Dream projects for the future. This is a stadium in a very densely populated area. It's used 4 or 5 times a year. And all the streets around it are narrow streets. We cannot have people move there. We will change it and make it a civic center like this. A park with small stadia and a big library and a multi-purpose hall and parking for thousands of cars for this densely populated neighborhood under the park. Design will start hopefully very soon. Another space we will move the stadium to another space in the middle of the city. This is Beirut Central Park where the Hippodrome is, and we will change it to Beirut Central Park with all the different activities. Traffic projects, we just commissioned a company to do a public transport plan for Beirut. We will give them 1 year, and we will have a study to be executed for public transport in Beirut, including bus system and maybe a tramway system. Disaster risk reduction. We are working with the World Bank. We will start very soon preparation of a master plan for Beirut city resilience with the help of the World Bank. As an earthquake professor myself, I know what it means as far as earthquakes, because Lebanon is prone. We have a big fault system that moves inside Lebanon. And this is the activities that happened all over the years. We had activities that go up to 7 on the Richter scale, if you know what I mean. So we will be preparing this master plan. We will start on it very soon. Finally, we're working on a city surveillance network. This project already started. And in 1 year or 1 year plus, we will have Beirut City being a safe city against crime and terrorism. This, we will have 2,000 cameras installed all over the city at the intersections, all types of fixed cameras, illuminators, PTZ cameras, if you know what I'm talking about, number plate recognition, data centers, storage, control rooms like this. You see, they told me, what is your vision of Beirut in the future? I tell them, we're trying to build a livable city for my kids, for my grandchildren. If it comes with some high technology, that's okay. Safe city to me is a city for people, where people can enjoy their life and feel safe about their kids and about their grandkids. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Mayor. That's very interesting to see how you describe the rebirth of a city and your future. Congratulations. The unprecedented urbanization in Asia has contributed towards enormous global economic benefits, but provided with huge social and environmental challenges. Ms. Dian Irawaty has an opportunity to work with some of these challenges in Indonesia, in many cities in Indonesia, where her projects were focused on urban poverty, housing, people's participation in urban planning, and very importantly, environment and youth. We welcome Dian to this session, and we hope to share some of our experiences and knowledge. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Oops. Can you hear me? I have to. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the conference and Sunil for allowing me to do the presentations today. My name is Dian Irawaty. I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. I work in this organization so-called Rujak Center for Urban Studies. And today I would like to share about what happens in cities in Indonesia. As we all know from yesterday's presentations and discussions that now we become in the era of cityness, that more people living in cities. In 2008, 3.3 billion people living in cities. In 2009, 3.42 billion living in cities. And it is predicted in 2030 that 5 billion people will live in cities. And it grows in numbers in 2050, more than 6.29 billion people will live in cities. And from that 6.29 billion people living in cities, almost half of them are living in Asian cities. As we all know now, in 2010, 1.6 billion people living in cities, in Asian cities, and it will increase into 3.1 billion people in 2050. It also happens in Indonesia. In 1950, we only have 4 cities. In 1990, we have 73 cities, and last year, 2013, we have 73 cities. And in regards to cities, there has been an uneven distribution of how cities develop. Mostly cities in Indonesia are developed in Java Islands or Sumatra Islands. If you ever heard about the islands of Indonesia, we have more than 13,000 islands, but this is the big islands. And the others is scattered in eastern part of Indonesia. And the consequences of uneven distributions of how regional development of city development is that almost more than 50% of the international airport are located in western part of Indonesia. 111 from 500 kilometers of 500 port is located in western part of Indonesia, and 111 compared to 500 kilometers of road that constructed is also constructed in Java and Sumatra. So these uneven distributions brought consequences. The urgencies in Indonesian cities. This is what we have from our research and from the perspective of the people that we have workshop in 4 cities. That first, the lack of fulfillment of basic amenities, basic infrastructures like sanitations, roads, and drainage systems, still issues in some of cities in Indonesia. And connectedness and mobility within cities, meaning how now we have issues on traffic, on how people can mobile very easily and effectively within a day in big cities in Indonesia. And also another issue is integrations among regions in 14 metropolitan cities in Indonesia. From that 14 metropolitan cities, 8 the metropolitan cities is located in Java. And the disappearance of kampungs due to urban development. You may all heard that Indonesia have this own traditional cultures, so-called kampungs, how people are engaged very closely with neighbors, and these kinds of relationship and cultures now quite diminished due to urban development, the constructions of malls, residentials that reduce the kampungs. And also another issue is relationship with natural or landscapes resources, like river or sea. We have no issues how river seen as a threat, and people, the government then tends to react in certain approach. And also the functions of common space. We just like what the mayor said earlier, that we also have lacking on the public space, common space, how people engage and feeling that they own the public space. And another issue is, I think, the relationship among government and its citizen. This is our organization, Rujak. Rujak is established in 2010. We aim to work with cities and regions toward ecological sustainability. We work from different layers, start from practical projects until the policy recommendations or advocacy based on research. We have 2 axes, co-productions of knowledge and policy changing process. That's the aim, that we work with different stakeholders in cities, from communities, governments, researchers, universities, and citizens. And in terms of smart cities, what we believe is that it is not only about technology, big data, or heavy infrastructures, but also how the city can able to enlighten the people so that people become smarter, and then the process is also smart, meaning that how the governments and the stakeholders in cities can work together. This is what we believe based on one of the urbanists called Abdul Malik Simon, that one of his books called People as Infrastructures, based on his research in Johannesburg. He believed that infrastructure is not only a heavy things like pipes, roads, bridge, but he put another notions on people's activities, that because these intersections of people activities within the city have establishing a new life in cities. Okay, and what city does to us? I live in Jakarta. I was born and raised in Jakarta, and for me, big cities and cities in Indonesia have like forced us as citizens to be smarter, creative, tactical learning. Like we have to deal day by day how to deal with the traffic, how to deal with the disasters like flood, and how to deal with many issues. And we then somehow force also to organize among ourselves to come up with alternative approach, how we co-producing knowledge among ourselves. This is one of the issues, traffic. And this is alternatives comes from the people, how the people engage among themselves. They have carpoolings, they have by foot revolutions, try to induce people to using streets and public transport rather than private cars. And in terms of co-productions of knowledge, I'm mentioning this since earlier, is that we believe that Indonesia, means Jakarta, has become a very center or a hub of information, knowledge, you name it, everything is centered in Jakarta. And what we see is other cities is left behind, or they see Jakarta as their main reference. And we have this program, so-called Urban Knowledge Dynamic, in 2011, where we would like to generate knowledge in Indonesian cities against the dominating role of Jakarta, because other cities in Indonesia always see Jakarta as reference, only Jakarta, Jakarta. And due to these limitations of knowledge about their cities, what actually takes place in the cities, how local economic operates, how decisions get made, how valuable resources are put to work is neglected or not aware of by its citizen and the government, local government. And what this limitation of knowledge create the sense of what is possible is limited, because you don't know much about your cities, then your ideas and imaginations about your cities become reduced. And the idea is just to use the plurality of cities as a means of understanding just how diverse the formations and operations of cities can be, that there are no single or one functional cities can be established, because cities is different, and that this diversity can be sharpened and as resources for cities to look upon themselves and to come up with other strategies, ideas on cities. And we collaborate with 4 cities now, with Pontianak, 2 cities in Java, 1 city in eastern part of Indonesia, and another city in Kalimantan. We collaborate with Surabaya, Makassar, Semarang, and Pontianak, mostly with youth, where this youth then collaborate with other stakeholders in cities. The main idea is how the youth able to draft their own narratives on cities, about the cities of Surabaya, because not many people write about Surabaya except researchers from abroad or private sectors, but not the cities, not the youth, not the communities. So we encourage them to do research of very small stuff about malls, everyday life, about what happens in the cities, in the histories of the cities, the future of the cities, and etc. And we also have the so-called participatory planning. We had this Festival of the Future in one of the village in West Java. The idea is to insert art and cultures into planning. So we ask people, the village people, to draw their visions within 10 years ahead about their villages. And we manage then, throughout this process, the government visited and see the process, and then they inserted the ideas of the people to the documents. I think this is a good thing, how the ideas then came into places in the government documents. And the urban poor alternatives. I've worked with the urban poor in the urban poverty issues. The idea is that the urban poor is also co-producing knowledge. They collaborate, they work together with other stakeholders in cities, they organize themselves, they do advocacy, they network with other stakeholders, they conduct a participatory with others also, and they put cultural and art aspect in the loop. And this is one of the examples of how they do research about the social social network, economic centers, and how the relationship among the communities. And these are two success stories in Surabaya and in Makassar. In Surabaya, the riverbanks settlements managed to fight for 5 years, do advocacy, and convince the governments and the parliament that they managed to do the upgrading. So they moved backwards for 3 to 5 meters. They faced their houses to the river, and they do the upgrading. So it is now legalized as settlements in Surabaya riverbanks. Another is in Makassar, also the urban poor who live in the private land, and they managed to come up with the ideas of sharing land, and they then given the land and collaborate with architects to design the places and others. My important note is that I think it is important since yesterday's discussion that we put citizen as a center for changes toward inclusive urban policy making process. But most importantly, it's based on co-productions of knowledge. I think it is important that we and them, or all of us, are having our own knowledge, and this is the interesting process how to combine this knowledge. And this is also important to note that it requires a role of intermediate. The private sectors, the NGOs, the artists, the academicians that can connect the micro solutions from the governments and the micro solutions from the people, so that it can work together. And then the third is that the improvement of so-called participatory approach. It has been highlighted yesterday that to what extent is it only communications, better communications, or up to collective decision makings? But most importantly, whether it is an efficient one. And I would like to highlight, I like the notes from Abdul Malik Simon, that the heart of the city life is the capacity for its different people, spaces, activities, and things to interact in ways that exceed any attempt to regulate them. While the absence of regulation is commonly seen as a bad thing, one must first start with the understanding that no form of regulation can keep the city in line. So I believe this is like ongoing process of how we respond to the dynamic of the city, how we co-produce knowledge together. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dian. That was really interesting. And your projection, or what you referred to, around 5 billion inhabitants by 2030 is the global challenge for all of us. Moving from Asian urbanization, talk of the participatory urbanization in Africa. And the participatory urbanization is fundamental not only to the region of Africa, but to the entire world. How urbanization shapes the African cities would have very profound and lasting impact on international politics and global economy. The cities in Africa are playing a very important role in keeping this balance, and this is an enormous global challenge, not only for Africa, but for all of us. Our next speaker, Ms. Victoria Okoye, has utilized two very distinct pillars of democratic cities: journalism by way of media and community engagement in delivering very important projects in sanitation, transportation, designing of public spaces, and working closely with communities. Victoria lives in Accra, Ghana, and works closely with international organizations like USAID and African development agencies. Welcome, Victoria.
Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. As I was introduced by Sunil, I'm so excited to talk about the role that community development can play in making the city of Accra, Ghana, a smarter city. And this is all work that I do through an initiative called African Urbanism. As he'd mentioned, I focus a lot on journalism, and it's about documenting urban development challenges, and then as well offline, engaging with citizens and how to improve their spaces. So I'm going to talk today about the city of Accra, Ghana. It is located in West Africa. As many of us know, Accra, Ghana, the country of Ghana has been independent for about 57 years. It's a country of 27 million people. In 2010, there was a discovery of oil and natural resources. So since then, there's been a gigantic economic boom. And in fact, the economy has been reclassified as a lower middle income economy. This is moving up from basically just a lower income economy. But one of the challenges that we've been seeing within the city is that this, especially international foreign flows, have not really trickled down to local community improvements and development. So the city of Accra itself, again, it's a capital of Ghana, as well as an economic, financial, and political center. As well, regionally, it's a regional trade and investment hub for West Africa. In the city, there are 2.3 million people. The population itself is increasing at an increasing rate. The annual growth rate is 2.6%. There's been immense rural to urban migration as the city of Accra has grown, people attracted to job opportunities, employment, etc. But at the same time, the city has more than 60% of the population is engaged in the informal economy. So when we talk about this huge economic boom, but at the same time, 2 out of every 3 people are not actually participating in this development. As well, 56% of citizens are under the age of 24, so a very young population. So when I think about what is a smart city and what does a smart city do for its citizens, I think about it in 3 ways. The first is that it can enhance performance and well-being of services within the city. It reduces costs and resource consumption, and as well, it engages effectively and actively with citizens. And ideally, this is using digital technology. But one of the challenges when we look at Accra, when we look at Ghana, is that there's a very low educational attainment rate. So there's a very low literacy levels. As I said, people are not employed, et cetera. So people have access to mobile phones, but not always data or internet. It's estimated that about 50% of youth from the ages of 14 to 18 have access to internet technology. So while there's a lot of potential, there's still a lot of challenges, and sometimes we have to work through both the sort of like smart technologies that we think about in terms of data, GPS, et cetera, as well as more traditional community engagement structures. But when we talk about community engagement, there are some very foundational challenges for a city like Accra. And specifically, there's a huge disconnect between the citizens and the governance. And we can think about governance in terms of, the city government, the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, the planning structures, water, works, and housing structures, as well as like the electricity companies. The way that they govern the city space, as well as there's a disconnect between the way that people have access to these structures to sort of provide feedback, to get information, and as well how they use their space. So what we see is this disconnect manifested spatially within the city. We see informal urban development. We see the disconnect between the way that the city is planned and the way that citizens themselves use and exist in this space. So I am particularly excited. I've worked in a few different sectors in Accra in terms of transportation, sort of cultural development and tourism. But what I'm particularly excited about and what I want to talk to you guys about today is public spaces, because I think that more than some of these other sectors, it's a very tangible idea for a lot of people that live in Accra. And in particular, it's a very it's a place where people come together, these public spaces, these community social spaces. It's a place that everyone, whether or not you have access to transportation, whether or not you have a job, everyone needs a place where they can come and they can be a part of a community. So again, I said that there's a disconnect between the way that the city is planned, managed, and organized and the way that people use their cities. So first, I'm going to talk specifically about a neighborhood called Jamestown. This is essentially where the city of Accra began 200 years ago, or more than 200 years ago. It's a historic district. There are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but at the same time, it's a working class community, economically deprived. There's poor infrastructure and services. It's actually classified as a slum. And there's proximity to, but poor access to city parks. So I want to talk about 2 city parks in particular. The first is Kwame Nkrumah Park and Mausoleum. This is a park that's actually named after the country's first president. This is essentially about 250 meters from the neighborhood of Jamestown. It's a beautifully landscaped space. There are gardens, there are fountains. It's a historical site. It pays homage to the country's first president, but it's an excessively exclusive space where It's actually fenced around, and you actually have to pay in order to enter. So this is a place where they charge one level for Ghanaians and another level for foreigners, but the amount that they charge is about 3 or 4 cedis, which ends up being about, $1, 50 cents, $2, but this is more than many Jamestown residents make in a day. So it's actually not accessible to them, despite the proximity to where they live. Another example is another beautiful park in the city. This is actually the city's largest park. It's called Afua Sutherland Children's Park. 12-acre park, green space. There are Ferris wheels, there are benches, there are beautiful trees, but again, it's very exclusive. It's fenced around entirely. There is a security guard that manages strictly who can enter and who cannot enter. And it's very much treated as a private venue where they prefer to have organized private events, and then you buy a ticket and then you can enter. And again, this is about 2 kilometers from the neighborhood of Jamestown. So these are the 2 parks that Jamestown residents have access to in terms of, physically, but they don't actually in reality have access to these spaces. So what's interesting is to see how residents create their own spaces. And I didn't point this out before, but I'll just point out. Does this work? This orange space is the community of Jamestown. And then this is Kwame Nkrumah Park, and then you can also see Afua Sutherland Park here. But what's interesting is to see how citizens, because they can't access these spaces outside, within their own community space, they're creating these spaces. So the idea is, how do we contribute to this? How do we bridge this disconnect between town planning and sort of informal usage of space? So first of all, I'm interested in looking at a few things, better understanding what are some of the factors that bring these people together. It's social activities, community life, events like this pickup football game here. It's commercial and economic activities. I'd mentioned that 2 out of 3 people essentially in the city of Accra are informally employed, and so you can see that small container shops, sidewalk vendors, they play a huge role in sort of bringing people together and establishing customer-vendor relationships. Accessibility, transport linkages, open spaces. I think often this is something that sometimes people take for granted. Having an open space that people can walk toward, easily access. They don't have to pay to enter. It's conveniently located. And as well, supporting infrastructure. Oftentimes, citizens will build their own chairs and shade and use that as a place where they can sort of use as a rest stop. As well, these spaces are safe and secure, oftentimes because they're located within the community. But even by the very nature of their existence, they build community social capital. These are places where people come to get to know one another, and they increase the security of their neighborhoods. So I'm interested in using public spaces as a lever for participatory planning and community development. And there's one specific project that I worked on, which was taking a parking lot, locally it's called a car park, and transforming it into a park for people over a period of about 3 or 4 days. So the first thing that is very important in general, and what we did within the scope of this project, was to identify an existing space that was very social in terms of the community, and we looked at a lot of these factors that I'd mentioned before in terms of infrastructure, accessibility, et cetera. And then this is where I think there's a huge role for smart technology or just smart community engagement. We used a participatory visioning process. We did a number of things. We organized meetings between community members, community leaders, and the local government. And this was quite critical because this is one of the few times, can everyone hear me? This is one of the few times when community residents had access to the leaders to whom they're supposed to be. These leaders are supposed to be accountable to these residents, but often are not. So this was one of the few times we had everyone together at the table, able to sort of share and discuss and debate their competing visions for the city. As well, we organized focus group sessions within the community to get people talking about, where are the spaces that they're interested in contributing to? What are the challenges of these spaces? And then based on this information that we got from those first 2 points, we designed renderings of potential, improvements for these public spaces, and we focused in on one. And then we got community feedback again, getting their insights about what do they like, what do they not like, what works, what doesn't work. So it was very much like sort of a continual process. And so what are we learning from this? I think when it comes to making Accra a smarter city, it really depends on creating a roundtable where stakeholders can come together, different stakeholders who normally don't talk to one another, where they can debate and discuss their shared visions for the city, their shared visions, especially for community social spaces. It's about gathering data and analyzing how people use space and as well how they want to use space. So sometimes we gather this data in the sense of, in this neighborhood of Jamestown, it's something like 40% it's only about 40% of youth who finish secondary school. There's a very low literacy level, so we weren't necessarily going to rely on high-level sort of like smart technology, but what we did was we made these designs and we got them to tell us, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And it was a lot of just like writing down the feedback that we were getting, recording the feedback, and then analyzing it from there. As well, feeding this data into planning. This is, I think, where there's a lot of potential in sort of convincing the government that there is a role for these sorts of spaces, and then having the documentary evidence in order to prove that. And I think what's also important is ensuring that city planning is responsive to citizens' needs and desires. I think that, for me, is what makes a city a smart city. And there's different ways that we can go about getting that information and making that happen. But at the end of the day, whether it's using technology, whether it's using focus groups, it's about creating a shared space where people can talk about what they want, making that happen, and then making citizens a part of this process. So it's a very participatory process. So the goal of my work is just to co-create in collaboration with the community, but also local government. All stakeholders, I think, should be invited and are necessary to have at the table. And then I think I'll just end by saying, what can a smarter Accra look like? And it goes back to this previous discussion of what is a smart city. It's about improving citizen well-being. It's about engaging and having active citizenry. And it's about, for me, for my work, it's about better performing public spaces. Public spaces that bridge the way that the government looks to plan spaces and the way that communities actually use their spaces. And I'll just end with some of the photos from this Park for People that we had created. And you can see there's young people using this space. And it's also a place that's bringing people together, different people of different ethnicities, where they can play games and sort of feel secure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. That's very impressive about the social capital and how you link the social capital to the smart city. Well done. The culture and history of any city are very important factors of its recognition and acceptance. There are cities around the world which have successfully demonstrated that right leadership, community engagement, and strategic policies can change the not so desirable culture and character of city. Once known as the drug capital of the world, Medellín today is an exemplary for aspiring cities around the world to take the challenge and reform the city with civic engagements and careful planning. It is with great appreciation and gratitude I invite our next speaker, Professor Jorge Pérez Jaramillo, to share his experiences and knowledge about transforming cities. Professor Jorge Pérez is currently the planning director of City of Medellín, which has got an impressive last few years of planning. Welcome.
Thank you all. It's my pleasure to be here, especially thanks to Mr. Sunil Dubey, our moderator, and my partner speakers here. It's a pleasure also to speak about Medellín, a city, as Sunil has said, well known for its problems and for its complications. Medellín is a sample that cities are a great option for life and equity. The urbanization growth is a challenge for collective intelligence to reduce gaps, to humanize our cities, and to create sustainability. Only transforming our cities, we will be able to transform human society. Our mayor, Aníbal Gaviria from Medellín, promoted the concept Cities for Life, and the last 7th World Urban Forum held in Medellín last April deal with equity in development, cities for life. So that means our future will be the future of our cities and our organized regions, new governance, and human challenges. Smart city thinking through knowledge, innovation, and cooperation must mean learning from the others, and will be the way, the only way. Smart cities means smart citizenship. I won't explain the images, so let me ask you to look at them while I'm speaking, because I won't describe each image. It's a methodology that brings me the chance to show you more things about my city while I speak about the main ideas I want to share with you. The urban agenda is the humanized urbanization, life with equity. The first idea is that Medellín means a process, a city in progress, a kind of urban laboratory in evolution, a city for innovative knowledge, using planning and urbanism and public architecture as a toolbox in search for equity and social inclusion. Our background is that during the 20th century, urbanization and social and economic challenge brought us inequity and exclusion, and a city with critical times during the end of the 90s. But that crisis was transformed into an opportunity, our opportunity for social, economical, political, and territorial change. We transformed that crisis of conflicts and violence into an option, into a shared option, a work developed together by all the components of our society. We created a presidential council for Medellín in the 90s that developed what we called Alternatives for the Future, a participatory, civic, and inclusive planning process, very inspirational and very powerful. We built the basis of a new leadership through communities. Communities became a collective power that shared a long-term project that means a diverse, participatory, and shared vision of the city. We have a tradition of planning, and we have developed planning as a tool. And from 1990 until now, we have used that tradition of planning through our universities and our local organizations to develop Plan Estratégico, Plan de Ordenamiento Territorial, Plan de Desarrollo. And one thing which is very important is a system of participatory local planning that is developed among the communities. So we have developed a strong local democracy with governance, with political and administrative local autonomy for the Colombian cities that has offered us the chance to decide by ourselves. Citizens sharing goals, walking in a cooperative way has been the way. Public plus private plus academic and plus social sectors has been a power for municipal development. Medellín means resilient, democratic, civic process through education, culture, leadership, and governance. Our structural gaps means challenges that ask for long-term policies with continuity and community-shared strategies with the support of stronger local authorities. The answer will not be found through national governments. We are now looking at the world from the cities and for the cities. The transformation of our communities will become from the cities. Equity for us is written through education and social integration. Democracy deals with good governance and right leadership, but also with the support of a community. Good planning brings success if the community and the local governments addresses the right priorities. For us, smart and innovative city is understanding innovation as a social tool. Planning plus urbanism and public architecture with democratic shared vision and leadership, it's the political inspiration for equity. Civic action means public architecture, parks, public spaces as instruments for integration and coexistence and peaceful development. In search for equity through inclusion and social responsibility, for resilience and sustainability and the governance of our cities and metropolitan regions, we work using technology, good management, planning, but governance means local democratic power. As I have said before, a long-term and shared vision with continuity is the main thing. In search of life for all is a time of humanism. We understand that cities as a human project, smart cities for life. Smart urban growth means wealth for people, urban development as a strategy for life. We have developed a tradition of planning that, as this image shows, is an opportunity and a strategy to transform this negative process of informal settlements that grow as a peripheral city, to use planning as a strategy to create a city for equality, for inclusion, for convivence, for sustainability, and for competitivity. We have used planning as the Plan de Ordenamiento Territorial that we have already approved 2 weeks ago, and that will orient the city until 2027 as a project for a compact city that won't grow anymore to the borders, that will grow inside, using strategic planning to develop the city inside, bringing a city for all, bringing a city of urban renewal processes with new public spaces, transforming in a more humanized way our mobility, using multimodal mobility, placing the non-motorized mobility systems and the transport system as the main objective of the city, using this image and this sample from Copenhagen, bringing a more equality and integrated urban development. So our strategy is using, as you will see, master plans, a plan of projects, of macro projects that will transform the reality of the city, using projects like the Medellín transformation of the river into a river park system, more than 24 kilometers of the transformation of this river into a park, the Metropolitan Greenbelt system, which is the transformation of the borders, very rich and biodiverse system of mountains into a Metropolitan Greenbelt preserved areas, using urban renovation, urban renewal processes in the town and in the borders of the river, and using civic facilities, as you have seen, as strategies for the transformation of the city. We have developed a very powerful multimodal transportation system using metro, BRT buses and trams, and also the famous metro cables. All those things together with some international competitions for some urban projects are part of the strategy to make this plan a truthful transformation of the city. So we use planning, we use urbanism, and we use architecture simultaneously to transform the city. I am proud to represent a city that expresses the power and energy of Colombian cities, because this is also a situation that is shared by some Colombian cities, and that brings us the chance to be in the future a better country. Let me invite you to our stands here in the Expo, and maybe there you can share information about the city processes, and maybe we can find a way to cooperate and to share experiences in the future. We are creating now, and just to finish, a platform for what we call global innovation cities, and we will invite all the world in next 2015 to Medellín to share experiences about innovative urban processes. We want to develop that as a first stage of an international center for sustainable urban solutions to share among our cities experiences, solutions, leadership, and shared dreams for the future. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, George. That was fascinating. You summarized it so well. Transforming cities is transforming human life, and you demonstrated it so well. It's hard to believe that one mega event can transform the entire city or region. Barcelona, the host of the smart cities or word smart cities, is a good example of this. The Barcelona Olympic transformed the entire city, and what we witness today has a direct link with this mega event. But what brings strategic success to the city is the entrepreneurship and engagement to bring such mega events to the cities. Our next speaker, Mr. Tim Howland, is a catalyst and city entrepreneur who brings culture, brand, and youth engagement at the forefront of the future cities. He also represents very important relationship with the cities, the relationship of private sector in working with communities and engagements. Welcome, Tim.
Hang on. Right, I hope the technology works. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I don't do anything terribly exciting like run cities or major projects. We are a commercial business that works with cities around the world. This is a picture of the Earth from the moon. Why am I showing you that? We currently use natural resources and exhaust resources at a rate that means we need 2 planets to survive. So we're involved in a business that tries to innovate and tries to help solve problems for cities. I was very lucky a few years ago to work. I worked in the sports business for many years, sports and entertainment. We were involved in the Olympics, all sorts of things. And I ended up working before the Copenhagen conference in 2009 with Prince Charles on his Save the Rainforest campaign. You may have noticed I'm not actually American, I'm English. Nothing wrong with Americans, mind you. I have to say that because I have lots of American colleagues here. And what was really interesting about that was at that level that people can convene brilliant scientists from around the world. And we sat in meeting after meeting working out what we were trying to do to say to leaders of countries. Because the news was so depressing and so bad that actually you couldn't give the message to the rest of the world because everyone would be terribly sad. So I made a decision at that point to try and work with projects and businesses that could make a difference. Is it that one?
Yep. Image. Boom.
I need my glasses now. So, no, I don't have my notes yet. So we've heard a lot, and we hear a lot from everything that's going out there. You know, we have huge population growth. We have mass migration to urban environments. Our resources are depleting, and we're overcrowded. Rapid urbanization is creating a lot of problems for a lot of cities and a lot of challenges. All city leaders want their economies to grow, they want their cities to be happy, and they want to reduce pollution and do all the right things. That's not always easy. A lot of what we do here and out there talks about energy, transport and data. Lots of focus on that. Big infrastructure projects around the world are often invisible to the public. We don't see the software, we don't see what's going on. We come at it from a ground-up solution. We try and think of things, and in this particular area, we're going to talk about a street dustbin, believe it or not, that actually is changing cities. We work in 47 countries around the world now. So we work from Norway, Sweden, Finland, right the way through to Australia. We're all over America, Europe. We're in the Middle East. We're starting to be in Africa, and we're working in Asia. So we work in many, many different cultures. The big challenge for us is this, litter. Can you hear me? Okay. The amount of litter we create globally is doubling by 2030. So what are we going to do with it? And there's a direct correlation between this and the quality of life for citizens and people. So we're working with the leaders across the world in London, New York, Dublin, Stockholm to try and solve problems. But as everyone said before, let's not forget that cities are actually about people. A lot of us live in cities. I live in a city. I live in London most of the time. And we have to create better environments. We need to put citizens first, and we need to be very focused on providing a service to our citizens, because ultimately we all report to each other. We all have to help each other. So we want to motivate behavior change as well and educate. So we're currently running the biggest urban recycling project in the world in New York City. It was launched by Mayor Bloomberg. And I'm not sure if anyone from New York City is here today, but we're currently now rolling out product throughout the city. Now, that wouldn't have happened without technology. So I'll come on to that technology in a moment. And we're also doing a big food recycling program in London. So that's right. So this is at the very heart of what we're talking about. Litter, you see it everywhere. Where there's litter, generally there's poorer conditions, poorer education. It tends to be the wealthy areas that get to have all the good kit and the resources. The poor areas tend to suffer. So litter actually is a real sign of social inequality, we think. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation was set up in 2009, and it's done a lot of research around the relationship between litter, all kinds of litter, health, which leads to poor health, where you have lots of it, fear of crime, and has a direct correlation to the depletion of the environment. So we looked at it and said, well, how do we start to address somehow? It's such a big problem, what do we do? This is quite a famous bin. This is the Apple dustbin. You trash all your emails in if you've got an Apple Mac. Is that actually the cleverest dustbin in the world? I'm not sure. What we've tried to do, in a digital sense, probably, but actually what we're trying to do is transform cities and waste and create better public spaces. We've always talked about public spaces because that's what cities are. We all have to live there together. And what we've designed is a waste solution for the digital age, blending big data and the Internet of Things, but let's face it, none of us had heard of the Internet of Things until about 2 years ago. Twitter started 5 years ago. So all these terms will change. And we use the cloud to communicate, because we all understand what the cloud is now, I hope. So I'm going to show you what we do. So what do? We use digital technology to be disruptive. We should be doing clever things with our infrastructure. So we looked at a dustbin and said, okay, we have to have them because we've got to have somewhere to put things. So we developed a bin that actually talks to us, not in a speaking sense, but digitally, and records exactly what's going into it. You've seen them out there. You'll see sensors, and it records how much waste there is, etc., etc. It's just very important that we start to disrupt the current mechanism. Sorry, I thought there was something up there. So when you look at businesses like Airbnb, I don't know if you've heard of Airbnb, we never thought that would take off. Who would have thought that a bed and breakfast business around the world would now be valued at however many £billion it is? Who would have thought that a taxi company, Uber Taxis, is valued, I think, at $17 billion because we have taxis, we have people, we have to move around, but someone's put a very thin layer of service across it to connect everybody and make it useful for people. So that's hugely important for us. And that's my disruptive picture. I saw the film the other day, Godzilla, and we quite liked it, so I put it in. So what do we actually do? How do we work? We have a bin. You can see that the diagram here shows the bin at the bottom. And because we have sensors in it, we can actually get 8 times more rubbish in it than a normal dustbin. What does that mean? You don't have to go and collect the rubbish as often. There's a good example in one of our cities in Nottingham. They've gone from, I think, 4,500 collections a week to 280. What does that mean? They reduce their costs enormously, and they can optimize all their collection times through collecting data, okay? It also means there's less pollution because trucks don't go out as often. Getting stuck behind a trash truck is not the most pleasant experience in any city. And so we cut down on CO2 and we're building cleaner cities. Sorry, I'm just changing this. So where we live does matter, whether it's streets, walking down the streets, or public parks, or even beaches. Interestingly, we had some news from Stockholm, from one of our partners there. And actually in Stockholm, I think it was Stockholm, or it might have been Uppsala, not sure. But in the parks there, because we've put units in that don't attract rodents, that are kept clean, we know when they need emptying, you can't get seagulls in them. People, they think they've gained 200 square meters of park simply because people now sit near the bins, because they can go there and sit there. We're also trying to do some clever things with dustbins beyond just collecting this data, because you'll see lots of sensors out there. We can all collect data now. We want to communicate back to neighborhoods, so we've now put Wi-Fi in our bins. We're starting to put screens on the outside of the bins, so we can talk directly to the public. A lot of the city messages we see, people don't read. In the UK, which is a sophisticated economy, local governments still send out information by leaflet because they think it's the best way to communicate. We like people to walk down the street, see our bins on the street, and actually we can give them a message. I was very interested to hear about the fault line in Beirut. In Japan, we're working with an organization, because we have solar-powered dustbins. If there's an earthquake, they will still work, and they can still use the Wi-Fi stimulus to communicate when there's a problem. We're working with the security services in London so that we can actually communicate through the bins if there's a terrorist problem. So there's lots of interesting things you can do, and this is a dustbin we're talking about. So life is changing quite a lot. But we want to create happy neighborhoods too. So Wi-Fi, security, information flow, less litter, all helps neighborhoods. And we can be relevant to that neighborhood. We can talk to them every day, which is important. And eventually, if you can talk to people, you can inform and educate. And ultimately, what we have to do is meet the circular economy, form a circular economy. So if we can educate, then we can get our citizens, good or bad, and some of us are good at litter, some of us are bad, but to start recycling, to reduce and reuse. And that's where I'll leave it. I could go on for a long time, but I've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Tim. You probably all heard a big bang telling us the sessions are over. So do we have time for one question maybe? Okay, I have got a permission. About the cities are always short of time. So may I please ask you for one question, and please direct your question to whichever speaker you want to answer. I would also encourage you to please be in contact with our speakers. The details of the speakers of the session would be online in the reports, and I would really encourage you to communicate directly with the speakers for any future questions. So we have time for one question. Please raise your hand or please come to the mic, and please direct the question to specific speaker. Any questions? And if no questions, I would take the liberty to ask you, Honorable Mayor, one quick question on behalf of the audience. In your day-to-day life, how do you tackle the enormous issue of cities where culture and infrastructure and innovation is going hand in hand, and you have to respond to all these three things in one day and by one body which is responsible for doing everything in your city? And yeah, it's a mic for you.
Well, I think this is kind of very interesting question. You know, as mayor, I receive every day around 100 calls. These calls range from fixing a manhole, a sidewalk, people nagging about a tower in front of their old heritage house. How come you gave the permit? And people nagging about garbage not collected on time. People nagging about litter on the beach, on dog waste on the corniche. Why don't you issue penalties to those people who let their dogs do it on the corniche, on the sidewalk? All kinds of things. Young people on the sidewalk watching TV and raising their voices around 1 a.m. in the morning. All kinds of calls from different people. I think a mayor should be equipped to answer, to address all the challenges of the city. As I said, we put all the priorities and we're working in parallel on different issues, infrastructure. For the first time, for the first few years in the history of Beirut, whenever it rains heavily, no water is collected in our streets. Streets do not flood. Beirut is a city where there is no flooding in the streets, no more. We're working on the green spaces. People now are proud of 2 beautiful gardens, and things will go on and on. But you know, people are not patient. And it's their right not to be patient because they don't trust in their leaders. And this is a big problem that we face every day. We tell them we are going to repair this garden, rehabilitate this garden, and have a parking under the garden. We solve 2 problems. One problem is the parking. Another problem is improving the greenery. They say you are going to remove the garden and put concrete. We don't believe in you. We go and tell them and speak with them, but they simply don't believe us. We need to work on people's confidence in their leaders. And this is a big issue, especially in our part of the world. They are used to crooked leaders. Sorry to say it. Crooked leaders who come and promise, they leave, they don't do anything. I'm proud that I'm heading a council of mostly private sector council members, energetic, who believe in the future, who are successful in their business, and we are trying hard and we are gaining the confidence of our people. So if you organize your priorities and you work in parallel, you will win the confidence of the people eventually.
Thank you. And let's take the opportunity to applause and thank all our panel members for their very important contribution. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.